May 8th, 1942. 1:30 in the afternoon, somewhere in the treacherous waters of the Coral Sea. The sky is thick with smoke and the screams of aircraft engines. You can almost feel the deck of the USS Yorktown shudder beneath your feet as another Japanese bomb tears through the flight deck. Metal screams. Fire roars. Seawater rushes in through ruptured hull plates, while damage control parties fight desperately against the flames and flooding. Captain Elliot Buckmaster stands on the bridge, his face grim, issuing orders as black smoke billows around him. This is no ordinary hit. A heavy Japanese bomb has punched straight through, exploding deep inside the ship, shattering bulkheads, disabling boilers, and leaving a gaping wound that trails a 10-mile slick of iridescent oil behind the carrier. Nearby, the Japanese carrier Shokaku is also burning from American strikes, but the Imperial Japanese Navy believes they have delivered a fatal blow to Yorktown. Their pilots radio back victory claims. Intelligence officers in Tokyo mark her as heavily damaged, likely out for months, if not sunk outright. For the next 18 agonizing days, Yorktown limps southeast toward Pearl Harbor. Her crew works without sleep, shoring up watertight doors, patching what they can with whatever steel and timber is at hand. The ship lists slightly. Men sleep in shifts on the hangar deck amid the stench of fuel oil and burnt paint. Every mile feels like borrowed time. Back in Japan, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto and his staff at Combined Fleet Headquarters breathe a little easier. One less American carrier to worry about. The next big operation, Operation MI, the strike on Midway Atoll, can proceed with even greater confidence. The Kido Butai, Japan's elite carrier strike force under Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, will face only 2 American flat tops at most. Victory seems all but assured. But as Yorktown finally steams into Pearl Harbor on May 27th, trailing that long, shameful oil slick, something extraordinary is about to begin. Something the Japanese never imagined possible. May 28th, 1942. Pearl Harbor Navy Yard, Dry Dock No. 1. The massive caisson gates close behind the battered carrier. As the seawater drains away, the full extent of the damage is revealed under harsh floodlights. Twisted steel, blown-out compartments, a flight deck that looks like it was hit by a sledgehammer. Naval inspectors shake their heads. At Puget Sound, this would take 3 months, maybe more. Rear Admiral Aubrey Fitch, who had been aboard during Coral Sea, had estimated 90 days. But Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, has other plans. Codebreakers at Station Hypo have cracked the Japanese plans. Midway is the target. Nimitz needs every carrier he can get. He walks the dry dock himself, looks up at the scarred hull of Yorktown, and gives the order that defies every engineering textbook. You have 3 days. What follows is controlled chaos. Over 1,400 civilian shipyard workers, welders, shipfitters, electricians, machinists, swarm the carrier like an army. They work around the clock in shifts that blur into one endless roar of grinding metal and sparking arcs. Rolling blackouts hit Oahu as the yard diverts almost all available power to the massive welding operations. Men eat sandwiches while standing on scaffolding. They sleep in snatches on the pier or inside the ship itself. They patch the hull with heavy steel plates. They splice electrical cables. They replace shattered bulkheads and restore watertight integrity where they can. 3 of the 9 boilers remain unrepaired. There simply isn't time, but the rest are coaxed back to life. The flight deck is smoothed and strengthened just enough for aircraft operations. Crews from the repair ship USS Vestal stay aboard even as the dock is reflooded. By the morning of May 30th, just 72 hours after entering the dock, Yorktown has water under her keel again. She looks patched and scarred, but she is moving under her own power. As she steams out of Pearl Harbor Channel, shipyard workers are still aboard, finishing last-minute welds and adjustments. Men on the pier wave goodbye, their faces streaked with sweat and grime. Yorktown is no longer the ship that limped home from the Coral Sea. She is something almost supernatural, a ghost risen from the depths in record time. And she is heading straight for Midway. June 4th, 1942, 4:30 a.m., northeast of Midway Atoll. The open Pacific stretches endlessly in every direction. Task Force 17, commanded by Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, aboard the hastily repaired Yorktown, joins Task Force 16 under Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance with Enterprise and Hornet. 3 American carriers against Japan's 4, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, plus supporting battleships and cruisers. On paper, the odds still favor the Japanese, but American intelligence has handed them the element of surprise.
Dawn breaks. Japanese planes from Nagumo's carriers pound Midway itself, expecting to soften the atoll for invasion. American land-based aircraft rise to meet them in a desperate, costly defense. Then the moment comes. American scout planes locate the Japanese fleet. Torpedo bombers from all 3 U.S. carriers launch first, devastators flying low and slow. Most are slaughtered by Japanese Zero fighters and anti-aircraft fire. It looks like another disaster. But those doomed torpedo attacks do something critical. They pull the Japanese combat air patrol down to wave-top height and force the enemy carriers to maneuver wildly, delaying the rearming of their own planes. At around 10:20 a.m., the dive bombers arrive. SBD Dauntlesses from Enterprise and Yorktown. You can picture the scene from the Japanese deck. Lookouts screaming warnings too late. The sky fills with screaming American dive bombers, plunging almost vertically. Bombs tumble away. In just 5 devastating minutes, Akagi, Gaga, and Soryu are transformed into infernos. Gasoline lines ignite. Armed and fueled aircraft on their decks explode in chains of secondary blasts. Massive fireballs rise into the sky. Japanese sailors leap into the sea as their proud carriers burn uncontrollably. Yorktown's own Bombing Squadron 3, led by Lieutenant Commander Max Leslie, scores multiple hits on Soryu, sealing her fate. For the first time in the Pacific War, the invincible Kido Butai is bleeding badly. But the fight is far from over. June 4th, 1942. Mid-morning aboard the Japanese flagship Akagi, before she is mortally wounded. Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo and his staff are stunned by the sudden American counterstrike. Reports flood in. 3 carriers hit, raging fires, uncontrollable damage. But one detail cuts deeper than the rest. Scout planes and observers report American dive bombers coming from a 3rd carrier. A 3rd carrier. Nagumo's intelligence had confidently stated that Yorktown was still licking her wounds from the Coral Sea, months away from operations, if not already written off. Japanese pilots had claimed serious damage, possibly a sinking. Now here she is, launching aircraft that are helping tear the heart out of the Japanese carrier force. Disbelief ripples through the command staff. How? How could the Americans repair a heavily damaged fleet carrier in mere days, when Japanese yards would have needed weeks or months? The reports had been clear. The damage assessments had been thorough. Yet the evidence is burning before their eyes. As Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu begin their death throes, The surviving Japanese carrier, Hiryu, launches a counterstrike. Her planes find Yorktown and hammer her with bombs and torpedoes. The American carrier takes heavy damage. She lists, loses power, and is eventually abandoned. But the damage is done. Later that afternoon, dive bombers from Enterprise locate and mortally wound Hiryu. By the next day, all 4 Japanese carriers that began the battle are gone, sunk or scuttled. Japan has lost the core of its naval air power in a single afternoon. The Yorktown's miraculous return had given the Americans the one extra fist they needed to deliver a knockout blow. For the Japanese High Command, the realization hits like a torpedo. They had underestimated not just American code-breaking or courage, but something far more dangerous: American industrial speed, ingenuity, and sheer will to improvise under impossible pressure. A single patched-up carrier had helped flip the entire Pacific War. June 6th to 7th, 1942. The waters near Midway. Yorktown, battered once more, fights for survival. Salvage crews work frantically to keep her afloat. But on June 6th, the Japanese submarine I-168 slips through the screen and fires a spread of torpedoes. One strikes the destroyer USS Hammond, which sinks almost immediately. 2 more hit the carrier. Yorktown refuses to go quietly. She lines through the night, still defiant, even as she takes on a severe list. At dawn on June 7th, she finally rolls over and slips beneath the waves, her battle flag still flying. She had given everything. Twice damaged, twice brought back from the brink, and in her final fight, she helped deliver a victory that changed history. For the Japanese, the loss at Midway was catastrophic. They lost 4 fleet carriers, hundreds of irreplaceable veteran pilots, and the strategic initiative in the Pacific. Never again would they launch such an ambitious offensive. The road to Guadalcanal, to the island-hopping campaign, and ultimately to Japan's surrender had begun. Back at Pearl Harbor, the shipyard workers who had performed the 72-hour miracle heard the news. Their exhaustion turned to quiet pride. They had kept one more ship fit to fight.
And the world learned a hard lesson about the American way of war. When pushed, the United States didn't just repair its wounds. It healed faster, struck harder, and refused to accept the limits others placed upon it. The ghost from the Coral Sea had risen, and the Imperial Japanese Navy would never forget the shock of seeing her again at Midway.